the morning of August 5th, 2024, getting arrested in my front driveway by a bunch of unmarked cars, and my wife's there watching me get stuffed in the back of a car. And it was the wake-up call I needed. It was finally the rock bottom, right? Here I am. I'm this relatively successful professional, never been in any real trouble in my life.
Welcome back to another episode of the Sober Motivation Podcast. Today we've got Greg with us. Greg, how are you?
I'm good, Brad. How are you?
Yeah, man, I'm doing well. Great to have you. Happy to hear your story here on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
So what was it like for you growing up?
For me, childhood was really good. Grew up in a small town up in Central Florida. Two really supportive, loving parents. Really can't complain about them. They did a great job for us. We lived in a small town, and even in the small town, we lived about 30 minutes away. I grew up on a dirt road. But even with that, parents would always take us to sporting events, Boy Scouts, keep us pretty busy. And, alcohol was around. My parents drank, but it was never like a big problem for us.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that too. Yeah. A lot of people share that too on the show. I think that there's this idea of somebody who struggles with alcohol, later in life, that they came from some sort of, rough background. And I mean, that is a lot of people's story, but there's also a lot of the story of what you share from your memories, and everything was pretty good. What's that like growing up in a small town off a dirt road? Like, what was that experience?
It was fun. You had to find a lot of different ways to keep yourself busy. And we were outside a lot and played a lot of sports and did a lot of activities. But for me, even from like a very early age, I felt very kind of uncomfortable in my own skin, right? Like it was one of these things where like I just never felt like I fit in. And living on this dirt road a little bit out of town, like even I remember as a fifth grader, I was hesitant to invite friends over because I was kind of like embarrassed of the part of town we lived in. And it's like, looking back on it now, it's so funny. It's like, what was I trying to like uphold as a fifth grader? Like, what reputation did I have to worry about? But that kind of feeling of uneasiness sat with me forever growing up, and it was never really like cool enough to be with the cool kids, smart enough to be with the nerds. I wasn't a good enough athlete to be with the jocks, and so it was just always this like feeling of not fitting in, and kind of feeling alone, even in a big room of people.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that too. That's a common trend, I'm sure. As you know, a lot of people share an experience like that in one way or another. Do you have siblings, or like the siblings growing up, or it's just you?
Yeah, younger brother. We're still pretty close to this day, I'll tell you a little more about kind of his stories because we're kind of woven in together. But great family life coming up.
Yeah. And you picked up on that like in grade 5 you mentioned all of sort of the groups of identity, right? Like the smart people and the sports players. I mean, where did you find yourself then, if not into any of those groups, just kind of alone?
Yeah, more or less, or with a small group, right? A couple of people that I, could really relate to. And then for me, my first drink of alcohol was probably like 12 or 13, but I didn't really start drinking heavily until I was probably 16 or 17. And, it was that point where it was like, man, the alcohol can make me be like who I want to be. It gives me that kind of sense of confidence. It lets me be a little bit louder, a little bit funnier. It lets me talk to the girls. And when I got into college, it really took off and gave me that sense of ease and comfort, and became president of my fraternity. Was helping with a lot of fraternity recruitment for the whole university, and alcohol served me well for a long time, for kind of another 10, 15 years after I started drinking. It was around, and it was always kind of planning on when am I going to get my next drink. Started with just Friday nights, Saturdays, wouldn't drink on the school nights, and then it would just get to a point where I was like, okay, well, Thursday nights are kind of like the Friday junior, the Fridays at work aren't too bad, so I can start drinking on Thursday nights. And instead of waiting until happy hour, I was like, well, I can have one or two at lunch, and it just kind of continued to escalate from there.
Yeah, sort of that slippery slope where it just becomes more and more maybe normalized in life, more acceptable. When you go back to your high school days, when you first drank at 12, I mean, what was that like? Was that sort of just checking things out, or?
Yeah, it was just like, let's sneak a couple of drinks in here and there at like the party, the 4th of July party or Christmas party, that sort of thing. Let's test it out and see how this kind of feels, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that rebellious. Not even maybe a teenager yet, but just rebellious. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's pretty common for people. Like a lot of people jump on the show and say like parents gave them a sip or, saw what the adults were doing, a rite of passage sort of thing. And I mean, I think there's a lot of people too who probably do that and don't, maybe end up where we did with all of drinking too. Like you just don't really know at the time, obviously.
Yeah.
How things are going to play out. But you were able to connect the dots to find some relief. It sounds like when you were 15, 16, like alcohol equaled relief from maybe anxiety or overwhelm or insecurities or, that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It was that kind of outlet that I needed, right? That I was looking for. This is making me feel better and I like feeling better. So let me just keep doing it and let me have more of it because the more I have, the better I feel, right?
Yeah. Any consequences for you? Like anybody saying, hey, well, hold on, Greg, this is getting out of hand or no?
Not at that age. Life got kind of harder later. From 2017 to 2020, over this 3-year period, I had a lot of loss in my life. My dad died. One of my wife's best friends passed away. We had another friend that had passed away and went missing in the Dominican Republic. Another friend had taken his own life. And then my mom passed away, and then you had asked about my brother. He was in an accident and unfortunately killed a young girl in a DUI driving accident. And this was all within 3 years of each other. And it was just like, man, I can't believe all of this. And then COVID's going on at the end of this run. And I started to take this like just kind of jaded view of the world where it was like, life's short. I'm going to just squeeze everything I possibly can out of it, and the whole YOLO mentality. And I was like, well, I'm just going to drink. I don't care who it hurts, what it does. And that's when drinking really started to get bad for me. But it's funny, actually, about like 6 months ago, I found an old journal that I had and I started reading it. It was one of those 5-minute journals. And at the end of every day, you write, what do you want to improve on? And at the end of each day, I wrote, I need to drink less. I want to drink less. And that journal, I look back, was from 2016. It was from a year before all of that run of unfortunate things happened. So it was like, man, like I knew I had a problem before all of that happened. I just kind of used that as even more of an excuse to really just kind of drown my sorrows.
Yeah, to ramp things up. Wow, man, that is a busy 3 years of life.
Yeah, it was hard. And for the alcohol just helped me numb it, right? It was the same kind of thing as back to the high school days, right? I didn't feel good. Alcohol made me feel better. And that's what I would turn to. I didn't really do any therapy. I didn't really talk to anybody. I was in my early 30s at that point. It was hard to relate to a lot of people that hadn't lost their parents. But really my whole family was gone in a very short period of time. And so it was hard. It was really hard.
Yeah, and when you look back at that stage too, was there something that you could put a finger on preventing you from saying, hey, maybe I should talk with somebody about everything that's going on?
Yeah, I think it was just ego and pride, right? I had been very successful in my professional career. I had been kind of working my way up the finance corporate ladder, thought that I had life under control, right? I was a smart guy. I have a master's degree. In my line of business, I was in the wealth management world, and I had a lot of really smart, wealthy people taking my advice, and so my ego was through the roof, and thought, all right, well, I can do all of these other things in life, so I can get my alcohol under control too. And little did I know that was not possible.
Yeah, and that's a good point you make there too, because a lot of guests on the show and a lot of people out there, I'm sure, listening, outside of their drinking, things look good. Yeah, there's that interesting connection there between like high functioning life and drinking alcohol. And my guess is you're always pressing on the gas. Alcohol is sort of the little relief or the escape from all of it, or to quiet down the stress or the noise. It's a place to really slow down. That's what it does to us anyway, right? Like it slows us all down.
Yeah, it was almost like another kick to my ego. It was like, oh, well, I'm a functioning alcoholic. Look at how much I can get done, even though I drink so much. Like, look at how great I am, and Like, I remember going out to happy hour with people from work and they'd have 2 drinks and I'd have 6. And I'm like, oh, well, you guys just drink slow. You need to get on my level. Like, it just continued to feed inside of my own head.
Yeah. And I mean, those can be things that are kind of celebrated too. I think so. In my social circles, especially in college, I mean, the more reckless you were, the more you could drink. That was just great for a guy like me who had no sense of belonging and felt really so bad about myself to have other people kind of high-fiving the behaviors, right? Kind of co-signing all of this stuff. I surrounded myself with, probably not the greatest people back then too. When we got together, we're all co-signing each other's BS, right? To do all of this stuff, this recklessness. But I was under the impression too, like, of course I would wake up from all of this. This is the, experience at the time. And I didn't at that time. I thought I would just flip a switch and start a career and all this stuff. And that wasn't the case at all. Going back a little bit too, though, kind of before this 2017 to 2020 stretch, what's the story on how this kind of snuck up on you? It sounded like, the college experience, I think we can easily justify that as, we were out of it. But I think it's really interesting sort of that what happens when we leave college and then we're like, okay, we're not like in college anymore, but some people share they're kind of still living like they were as far as their drinking. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, the drinking just became like what we did socially. All the events that we would do, everything was centered around drinking. It was, okay, we're going to go watch this game. So which bar are we going to go watch the game at? We're going to go to this concert. So which bars are we going to go drink at before the concert? Everything, just our entire social life revolved around when we were going to get our next drink and where we were going to get it from. And that just, continued to feed on itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you conscious of this at the time? Like realizing, hey, everything I'm doing involves drinking and we're planning drinking and we're always wanting to be drinking? Yeah.
No, not conscious of it at all. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of one of the things I pick up to as sort of the sneakiness of it all is that it just makes its way into sort of every area of your life. I mean, over years and then all these events. And I talk with a lot of people and they say, I didn't even really care about the game anymore or the concert anymore. Drinking was number one. Yeah. The concert was just sort of the excuse. I used to love that too, though. Like the college basketball days, college football days on Saturday, NFL was Sunday. I felt like I could kind of blend in with a lot of the heavy drinkers. Like they would drink, but they would get on with their life. But I loved that because then I could start early on Saturday, blend right in with the crowd and say, yeah, I love basketball. I love football. I didn't care about any of that stuff. It maybe in my mind, I felt like less alone or having less of a problem of like, hey, this is what everybody's doing. So I'm good.
Yeah. For me, boredom is a big trigger. Like when I'm bored, I want to go do something. And for me, doing something was going and sitting at the bar. And, I would just be like, okay, well, I'll go to the brew house down the street and I'll sit in front of the TV and I'll watch the game and I'll make small talk with the bartender or the other people around. And now I'm doing something, right? And it's like, man, like I'm not really, I could just be easily watching it at home and not drinking and doing the same, really getting the same thing. But in my head, that it was my justification. And now I'm out, I'm talking to people and being social. So it's not bad.
Yeah. Yeah. The things that we kind of convince ourselves of too. I mean, the bar scene is kind of interesting. You feel, I did anyway. I felt like a sense of belonging there. You go to the same place, people know you, they know your drinks. Like it feels like there's something bigger there. I mean, I think when we peel back the layers, like people are just doing their job, and I mean, it's based off getting tips, and so they're just like being overly friendly. That's what they're there to do. But I think I had a perception of it as something different. I just remember the early days when I would walk into a bar and the weight of the world would be on my shoulders the second the door opened up, and you just kind of feel the vibe. And it felt like time just stopped, like I was going to get my beer, and it was like the anticipation. And it was just, that was almost a big part of the process as well, kind of walking in there and everything's sliding away.
Yeah. Oh, totally. It's wild. Like, I thought that's where my social life was, right? I thought the bartenders were my friends. I thought the people at the bar were my friends. But it's been over a year and a half since I've had a drink those bartenders aren't checking in on me to see how I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like, they're like, hey man, where you been? Like, it's, you know, they're doing their job, like you said, and they're taking care of the people that are there. But yeah, it was that false sense of fitting in and wanting to find some connection that I thought I was finding.
Yeah. And that's another thing that I always hit home on, is that alcohol is sort of that cheap entry to connection.
Yeah.
How much depth is there to those connections we make? Like your bartender sort of story there. Like, I think we realize with time, they're not a whole heck of a lot, but it's like you show up at a bar and you're drinking, and then you loosen up a little bit. Everybody around us is a little bit loose, and we can start making connections like that situation, you know, in your 30s can be really uncomfortable in other places, you know, dog park or coffee shop. You're probably not going to roll up on people and be like, hey guys, how's it going? Like, and that's another thing I think for, you know, I'm relating to you a lot here with that sense of belonging and maybe trouble connecting with people without the alcohol. I'm relating to that a lot. And I think for me, that was just sort of an easy way in. As long as me and the other person drank, we could just kick it off. You know, we had that in common, but it's just not based off a whole heck of a lot. Did you go to the bars a lot? I mean, that was a thing for you.
Oh, yeah.
Are you single? You're single at this time?
No, married at the time. I'm still married today, but I was much more of a bar drinker. I wanted to be out talking to people than I did sitting at home. You know, that was my go-to. I enjoyed like you said, the social aspect of it. You know, it made me feel like I wasn't alone.
What does your wife think about the trips to the bar?
I think she, you know, especially towards the end, she was starting to get pretty worried about me. You know, after that string of events that the 2017 to 2020, that, like I said, the drinking really started to pick up. And of course, I started acting out in other ways. I'm not being a particularly good husband. My health is starting to deteriorate. I'm putting on a lot of weight. At one point, you know, I was 38 and I got diagnosed with AFib. You know, my heart rate was just erratic, and I went to see the doctor, and, you know, he's telling me, he's like, man, you're my youngest patient by a couple of decades. He's like, people in their 30s don't get AFib unless you're really beating your body up. And, you know, it was still another couple years before I finally did something about it. But, you know, it started to really take a toll on life and on our relationship in particular.
Yeah. Yeah. So you went to see your doctor there, and do you guys have a conversation about drinking? I mean, is that part of it? I don't know much about that, but does that play a role in it?
Of course. And, you know, he's like, how much do you drink? And, you know, I lie, and I tell him, you know, a number way lower than I drink.
What do you tell him?
I think I probably tell him 5 to 10 a week or something like that. And, you know, it's 5 to 10 a night, but, you know, I don't want to admit it. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, it got pretty out of control.
Yeah. So that was sort of a thing where your kind of health comes into the picture about how this is affecting you. I mean, let me know your experience, though. I feel like growing up, I didn't really know. Now, this sounds so naive, and I think we have moved a lot further in this direction. I didn't know alcohol caused any problems with health or anxiety or anything. I had no idea. Did you growing up?
No clue. Yeah, it wasn't on my radar at all. And, you know, even when I started having the palpitations, you know, I just thought, I didn't make the alcohol connection. I thought maybe I'm just dehydrated, or, you know, I worked out too hard or something. You know, I just didn't make sense until I finally saw him. And he said, you know, this can really be brought on by alcohol and caffeine. And at that point, that's all I was drinking, you know, coffee in the morning to get me to happy hour. And then I'd be drinking the rest of the day, and you know, hardly ever took a sip of water. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting too. I had a buddy of mine, and he liked to drink a lot. And I asked him, I said, I used to work with this guy, and I said, do you ever drink water? And he was like, literally, he told me for maybe a week sometimes he wouldn't drink water.
Yeah.
And I think he was serious. But you wouldn't go a week without drinking water. But I think he was serious. And I was like, I couldn't imagine that.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. But, you know, like you said, I get so wrapped up. I'm not thinking about taking care of myself. You know, I'm just worried about when's the next drink coming? And that's all that my mind is thinking about, and not worrying about, the physical consequences at that point.
Yeah. And things in this space of your life, I mean, career is going well. That stuff is still moving forward, right?
Yeah. So up until kind of the end of 23, early 24, things had been okay. But, at that point, like I said, I was not being a particularly good husband. I had left the job that I was working in at the end of 23. So when 2024 came around, right at the beginning of the year, I wasn't working. I had some money saved up. My wife and I weren't on great terms at that point. I'd kind of alienated myself from a lot of friends. And like I said earlier, boredom is kind of a trigger for me. So I've got all this spare time and, enough money to just go and sit at the bar literally all day at that point. And, things got, that kind of 6-month stretch at the beginning of 24 was when things really got out of control for me. And it got to a point, where I was alone. I was drinking alone a lot. And, I had messed up a lot in my life, and I started to feel like such a complete failure. I had felt like I had let my dad down, because when he passed away, I'm the oldest of the family. I'm supposed to be kind of the man of the family, and my mom passes away kind of under my watch, right? And my brother has his accident and ends up in prison, and I'm supposed to be the good influence, and I'm not there to help him, at his darkest times. And, my wife and I are not in good terms, so I'm failing as a husband, I'm failing as a son, I'm failing as a friend, and I just, and it got pretty dark where I just wanted to end it, and ended up psych ward. And, I'll never forget the psychiatrist there asking me, he's like, "Do you think you have a drinking problem?" I said, "No, I don't have a drinking problem. I just have a people problem. If everybody would just do what I tell them to do, everything would be okay. It's not my drinking, it's them." And what a jaded view of the world. And within 24 hours of leaving that place, I'm back drinking again and back at the bar and thinking that that's going to solve all my problems. It's pretty scary what your mind can do to you.
Yeah. Yeah, and when he asks you the question, it's interesting, and picking up in different people's stories, like the lengths that we will go to defend alcohol being in our life.
Yeah.
But realizing, I think, looking back, the questions that a lot of these people are probably asking us, they already know they know, because they've seen it before, experienced. Yes. But this is the thing when it comes to the drinking is, it doesn't work out because it's everybody else's idea, or because everybody else thinks we have a problem, or everybody else tells us that we need to sober up. They notice it long before maybe we do, or we're willing to do anything differently. Yeah, I had so many of those encounters with people. I mean, my goodness, like probably 5 years, I would be in front of doctors, in front of judges, in front of everybody else probation officers. I mean, so many interventions, right? That would just say, my parents, that would just say, "Come on, man, this is a serious problem. Your behavior in general is a serious problem. And if you have any goals in life, you're never going to achieve them because of the way you're living it." But in my mind, I thought like I was living. It's so wild. I thought, you know what? This is life. I'm living. Things are good. Interesting.
Yeah. And from that point on, 6 weeks later, I'm back at that same psych ward, back in front of the same doctor, same issues. And at that point, I'd done some things that I knew I was going to get in some legal trouble for, and ended up, the morning of August 5th, 2024, getting arrested in my front driveway by a bunch of unmarked cars, and my wife's there watching me get stuffed in the back of a car. And I end up doing 6 months in jail, and, got out at the beginning of February of 25, a little over a year ago. But that jail experience, it changed me, right? It was the wake up call I needed. It was finally, it was the rock bottom, right? It was, here I am, I'm this relatively successful professional, never been in any real trouble in my life. I get thrown into kind of the max security side of the jail with 31 other men. Half of them are there on murder charges. One guy gets sentenced to life, another guy gets 40 years, guys that I'm in there with, and I'm just scared out of my mind. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. And there was a couple of moments in jail that really, like I said, kind of changed things for me. One was one of the first days they had moved us to a new block of the jail, and I walk into this 2-man cell, and there's a little card sitting on the desk, and I walk in, and this card, it has a Bible verse, Jeremiah 29:11. It says, I know the plans I have for you, plans to not to harm you, but to prosper you and to give you hope in the future. It was like, man, what are the odds of me picking up that card? Like, I happened to walk into that cell. There could have been 31 other guys that walk in and pick that up, and I'm the one that picked it up. And it was like, okay, like, this is a moment, right? This is like that kind of fork in the road. Like, where do you want to go? Like, what are you going to do with your life? Like, I could really easily go down one route, or I can say, okay, I have a problem. I need to go get help. And what am I going to do? And that was a turning point for me. And then about a month or two later, one of the guys that I was in there with was going to an AA meeting at the jail, and he convinces me to go with him. And so we go. And the guy at the jail that brings the meeting in, he gets up and he tells my story. Financial advisor, the whole background, the whole feelings, everything. I'm like, man, this is crazy. What are the odds that this guy has my story talking at the jail? And so I go up to him afterwards. I ask him, where does he go? Like, I need to go when I get out. And he tells me he goes to this clubhouse 3 minutes from my house. It's like, wow, like, what are the odds? And, so when I got out, a little over a year ago in early February, I went to that clubhouse and I went to that meeting, and I raised my hand and I asked for help. And it really started this new journey for me, and just forever grateful for the guys and women in that room that have really helped me.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Fork in the road. That's it. Going back to the scene of you getting arrested there too. I mean, what's going through your mind there? I mean, from somebody who's never been in trouble and now, you are.
Even at that point, my ego is still through the roof, right? I'm like, okay, well, I'll just go and I'll bail myself out. I'll get bailed out in the morning. And so, I'm like, all right, we'd had a lawyer because I knew this was kind of coming, and I'm like, all right, well, let's just, get the best lawyer we can get. We'll pay a lot of money, and I'm okay with that because I don't deserve this, right? This has been brought on by other people, and I'm the victim, right? That's my mentality, it humbled me, and I needed to be humbled. It was exactly what I needed, but it was scary, the ride down to the jails, 20, 30 minutes from my house. And the whole time I'm like, all right, what do I do? I can't show any fear. I can't be nervous. I've got to hold myself up and, but on the inside, I'm shaking in my boots the whole time. It was quite the experience.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it. And, that's the thing, like, to try to be like, I'm not going to be nervous, but I mean, you're going to be nervous anytime something's new, right? And how are you going to, a lot of that too is not, exactly what people see on TV, right? On how things go. I mean, I was under, cause I got arrested, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 times, spent a year one time in jail. And, it's interesting how it all kind of plays out. And I remember going to AA meetings too, and I would take these little courses and stuff. I mean, ultimately at the time it helped me out, but I was just looking for something to do just because boredom and everything else.
Oh, yeah.
But it planted a seed in one way or another of like, hey, this is kind of, this is all possible.
Yeah.
And you kind of get in there. I mean, when do you connect the dots though here? Because you're getting arrested. Drinking is not really, I mean, you kind of know it's a problem, it sounds like, but not really willing to really do anything about it, maybe up to this point. When do you connect the dots that if I don't want to go through these experiences or live this life of the psych wards and feeling this way about myself, I have got to quit drinking? I mean, was there like some moment or some thoughts that went into that?
I think it was while I was in jail. I think there was, like you said, there's a lot of free time, and it was like, okay, I don't want to do this again. And the things I'd done was all fueled by alcohol, and that got me into this place. But even when I got out, I had an ankle monitor on, and so I was limited in kind of where I could go. And AA meetings were one of the places I could go. And so it was like, well, I'll go to the meetings because I probably have a problem, and it's something to do, right? But when I got there, like I said, I raised my hand, and this man comes up to me, and he I'll never forget. He goes, "Hey man, I like your jewelry," and he's talking about my ankle monitor. And we end up talking, and I could just relate to him right away. And he tells me about some of the things he was struggling with, and was like, and he said, "All right," he's like, "Do you want to get better? Do you want your life to improve?" And he's like, "Keep coming back, and keep coming to meetings, keep sharing." And once I started to see, they talk about, right, look for the similarities, not the differences. Once I started to see the similarities in everybody's stories, that's when I finally started to say, okay, I really do have a problem here. But it took a couple of weeks for it to really click.
Yeah. Explain that a little bit more too, for anybody that might be listening and that sort of is new. Look at the similarities, not the differences. Like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, so this clubhouse we go to is a pretty big one. The meetings, I go to the 5:30 meeting almost every day. There'll be 80 people in there. And for me, I'm looking around and I'm seeing all of these people, and, it's a mix of older and younger genders and everything. And I felt kind of that same feeling I felt as a 15, 16-year-old, right? Like, I don't belong. I don't fit in. I can't relate to any of these people. Again, my ego is telling me, like, I've been this successful professional. I'm just going to go to this room with a bunch of drunks that have problems. Like, they're not like me. I'm not like them. How can I, relate to them? How are they going to help me? And, and then all of a sudden you start hearing people's stories, and they start talking, and now they're sharing the same emotional things that I felt. The physical stories are all slightly different, right? But I could feel the same shame, the same guilt, the same fears that I could relate to. And that's when it finally clicked, was like, wow, like, everybody in this room, there's something about them that I can connect to. And at the back of the room, there's a sign that I love, and it says, "You are not alone." And that was like, man, like, I love seeing that there, because, like I said, I always felt alone. And now all of a sudden I'm with a group of people I can relate to on a whole different level.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that too. I noticed that is one of the things that gets so many of us sort of stuck with getting help, is because I can only speak for me, but I was the overly unique person who had this solo life that nobody else could understand, And I think for me, it played into sort of being the victim of circumstances, right? Like, nobody's going to understand. And what I found too is just being around other people that were on the same journey, working towards the same goals. We all did share things that were similar, but I remember I went to my first AA meeting. I was 17, and I went to this meeting. It was across the street from my high school. Like, how weird. I was just like, I'm in high school. Everybody's out front smoking cigarettes. I didn't smoke cigarettes at the time. My mom drops me off. It was like this part of aftercare program for this treatment center I went to. They're like, you got to go. Like, I wasn't even really a drinker at all, really. I went to rehab for a year when I was 17. So this was the tail end of like, you should keep doing what you're doing, right? So I just went with the flow. But I remember that. I remember that just clear as day. I'm sitting around this room in this small town. There's probably like 8 people, and there's a burning pot of coffee. That's all I can remember is that. I can remember that most, the smell. And I was like, this is not where I belong, And I just wasn't at that stage yet to realize, just because I hadn't been through what they were sharing about what was mentioned to me that like, is if you keep living this way of like lack of accountability, no responsibility, lack of purpose, not having goals in life, like you increase the odds of experiencing these things. And later down the road, they would start happening because I didn't sober up then and things would start happening. So I think it's always a good reminder for us too, is like, hey, we might not be living that way now, but we also have to realize that nobody woke up one day and said, I'm just going to burn my life to the ground and just drink beer all day. Like it's progressive, it's sneaky, and it can happen quick or it can take time. A big thing that triggers it is when something happens in life. I mean, in 2017 to 2020, you lost a lot of people that were really important to you. And if we have alcohol in our life, we tend to lean more on it and less on things that are going to be healthy, less going to therapy, less connecting with friends. And then it's just like we're on our own, we're isolated, and we just get whacked over the head with it.
Yeah. It's funny you brought up the therapy and friends because, I did try that, right? Like I would go talk. At one point I had 3 different therapists I was seeing, but the problem was I was lying to all of them. I'm not telling them the truth about how I'm actually feeling and what's going on in my life. I'm just telling them some story that they want to hear, or I think that they want to hear, just to kind of check the box. And at that point, with friends, I wasn't being honest to any of them either. It was that I thought that, they're living this life, right? And it looks great from the outside, like mine probably did from the outside, but I was like, well, I can't open up. I can't share what I'm actually feeling. It's vulnerability and I can't be vulnerable. Right. So yeah, I had to finally get honest with myself about about alcohol was a problem. And then 2, like how I was actually feeling and being open about how I was actually feeling and being willing to be vulnerable because the people always say, right, your secrets keep you sick. And that was so true for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another thing too, that people do hit on a lot, kind of going, all of these other people were coming in front of, right? The doctors, the psychiatrist there at the psych ward or whatever it was, your therapist, telling them half truths or not the truth at all. But I think like maybe oddly enough, we kind of start to believe some of this stuff as truth too. Like, hey, like I don't have a problem, or it's not the drinking, or I think I'm feeling good. And it's like,
it's funny. Actually, one of those therapists fired me because she told me, she's like, I'm not going to work with you unless she's like, you're an alcoholic. I'm not going to work with you unless you start going to treatment. And I said, all right, I'm not going to treatment, so I just won't work with you. It's like, man, the egotistical side of me, like I said, just did not want to admit I had any sort of problem or that I couldn't solve it on my own.
Yeah. What part of that felt so scary?
Yeah, gosh, that's a great question. I think that just being vulnerable and really like expressing my emotions, it wasn't something. Growing up, we didn't talk about our emotions a lot. Despite my parents being good parents, it just wasn't something we did. It was kind of just grit your teeth and get through life. And so I felt like I just needed to internalize it all. If I start sharing, that's just a sign of weakness and people won't respect me if I share how I'm really feeling.
Yeah, that's powerful. Does the word like control come into it at all? Like, I think too, when I think of like when I started to be more vulnerable and when I continue to do so, I feel like there's a little bit of resistance there because I'm giving up the control about how other people might perceive me or the situation. But when I don't share anything, then I feel like I can control the narrative, even though people see through it, but we can still feel like we're in control. When we're vulnerable and we share what we're actually struggling with, we leave it up to, if we share with other people, their perception of us and the situation. I mean, does that?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I saw something the other day and they were talking about the illusion of control. And it was like, I wanted to control everything. I thought, I came from this house on a dirt road. I went to school. I was president of my fraternity. I had built this really good career, was making a lot of money. I thought I had done all of these things, right? Like, look how smart I am. Look how good I am at all of this. And I've got it under control and I can take care of it. And, it was all me, I. And so why would this be any different, right? I can control it. I thought I've controlled everything else in my life. So why can't I do this? And at one point, I think in like 2021 or something, I'd stopped for 45 days. I went without drinking, and that was probably the worst thing I could have done, because then at that point it was like, well, alcoholics can't stop, and I stopped for 45 days, so I'm not an alcoholic, right? And I think after those 45 days, it just got worse, not better.
Yes, man. I mean, that confusion plays into a lot of stories too. Yeah, of course. I mean, or even some people too that might struggle with sort of binge drinking too, right? If they can go a week or maybe 2 weeks, but then the bottom falls out, it can be a confusing place, because it's like, what does this make any sense, right? But I think we realize too on this side of the journey, the amount we drink, the frequency of how we drink, like none of that really matters. Like it doesn't qualify one way or another.
Yeah.
I think like more the underlying stuff you're talking about that's going on in your life, or that's went on in your life, and how you feel inside in the box that alcohol is checking.
Yep, you're exactly right. It was all the emotional stuff inside of me, and the baggage that I had been carrying, the things that I had stuffed deep down. That was the real problem, right? And the alcohol became my solution, right? The alcohol helped me feel slightly better, at least for the first couple of drinks. And so, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to escape. I didn't want to try to face reality.
Yeah. Switching over to how things are for you now, share a little bit of that story with us. I mean, you do this 6 months in jail, you get out, you start plugging in, to your meetings. I mean, what starts changing, right? Because you have all of these things we talked about in great detail. How do you start shifting away from like this ego and this, how you feel about yourself, into who you are today?
Yeah. It's been an incredible journey. It really has. And, like I said, that man that ended up coming up to me talking is my sponsor in AA. And, we walked through the steps together, and finally got honest with someone. I finally, we're going through the fifth step, and I tell him everything. And it's the first person, I've ever been completely honest with. And, I think there's a couple of things I told him that he's probably the only other person in the world that knows about. But, there was I could feel a physical release from my shoulders and from my back when I went through that process with him. And I'm forever grateful for that man. And one of the things he always says, he's like, do you just want to scratch at the surface, or do you want to go deep? And he says, how sober do you really want to be? And and it's turned into just an incredible journey. And I've had my wife has been just a rock, stuck by my side through all of this. They're supporting me. She's stopped drinking herself, even though, she didn't have the same, problem, but, she feels better. She's just, wants to be supportive. And, so she's just been amazing. But our marriage is the strongest it's ever been now. We can actually talk about things and not just try to hide things. And so, from an emotional perspective, life has gotten so much better without trying to hide and bury everything, and just being honest about stuff. And I've had the opportunity now to sponsor a couple of other men. I bring meetings to treatment centers, and doing that has really helped me to be able to help other people and kind of give back, what's been given to me. Helps one, it helps remind me of where I was, but two, it gives me a purpose, which is great. I was, like I said, in my professional career, I was a financial advisor helping ultra wealthy people really just get wealthier, right? And in a sense, I left very empty. Felt like I wasn't really helping people. I didn't come from money, and I'm helping these guys make millions of dollars more, and I'm not getting anything out of it. And now I've got a couple of guys that have been sober for 9 months or more, and that's really cool. It's really cool to see, and it's really fulfilling. And so my life has got purpose. It's more fulfilling. It's much more calm. It's much more peaceful. Relationships are better, and it's all because I'm actually doing some of the deep inner work now.
Yeah. Beautiful, man. Yeah. That's what it's all about. I mean, there's so much more to this than, just not drinking. I feel like in the beginning, for me anyway, it was like, man, that's going to be the biggest mountain to climb ever, just not drinking. And then you quit drinking and all of this other stuff rises to the surface, right?
Yeah.
Of things I need to work on or address or look into or conversations to be had. And, the thing of just not drinking kind of, it's always there. It's always an important part of it, but it's like, what other work are we wanting to do? What else are we willing to do? I mean, when you look back throughout your journey of drinking and stuff too, I mean, the denial word pops into mind about, there's not a problem. Everything else in life is going pretty well. Like, what was it that moved you past that? I mean, was it that kind of final arrest of like, hey, this is my reality now, when that probably felt like something that was impossible to happen to a guy like Greg, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally. That was the moment, it was like, never in a million years did I think I'd end up, in that jail cell with some of these guys for 6 months, and I learned a lot in there about myself, but also just about other people. And it was humbling, but it was the humbling I needed to go from taking care of, people with hundreds of millions of dollars to being in a dark, dirty, mold-infested jail cell, really can bring you down to reality of, what the wreckage that you caused. And ultimately, it was a blessing in disguise. It was really what I needed.
Yeah, which is interesting too, because I'm only guessing here. I wasn't with you on that day when you got arrested, but it can maybe feel like this is it. Like this is the biggest failure sort of ever and all that stuff, right? But now looking back, you say, my goodness, I mean, what perfect timing. Yeah,
it really was, and it was, I remember at that moment, like I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. What am I going to do professionally? What am I going to do personally? Is my wife going to stay with me? My friends going to still talk to me? Like, what's going to happen? And just all these fears running through my head. And when I get out, it was like, okay, I'll go to these meetings. And like you said, I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, what am I going to do without alcohol? What am I going to do day to day? I don't know. And I had shared with one of the guys that I was bored, and he told me, he goes, well, that's because you're a boring person. He's like, you don't do anything. I'm like, oh, wow. Like, I guess you're right. Like, yeah, if I don't do anything, I am boring. And, so it's been beautiful. My wife and I have gotten to just like explore so many new things and find new interests in life now too. And, this weekend we're going to a magic show with some friends from the program, and we go to a lot of concerts, and, there's a lot of, we're taking a dance class soon, like just things like I never thought I would have ever done. But it's like, why not? Like, let's just go see. And, there's no reason for me to be embarrassed. I've been embarrassed a lot more other ways. So why not just go out and have some fun now? Yeah, good point there. When you go back to the other parts in your story too, of sort of that feeling of being uncomfortable, how have you been able to work on that? And what's sort of that process been like on this side of things? Yeah, I think it's going back to the being honest part and talking and sharing more. And I found that the more I share, the more I talk, other people will come up to me afterwards and say how much they resonate, with something I said. And for me, that helps me feel comfortable and feel like I'm a part of something. And so, that's what gives me that comfort that I was kind of lacking before, is now like, I know this person can relate to that. I can relate to this other person. I feel a sense of community and groundedness that's authentic. It's not just centered on the beers at the bar like before, right? We can have real deep conversations about things, and that's really cool. It's really cool to see. Yeah. So just really putting yourself out there, I guess, just with being uncomfortable can make you, and I think not drinking too
can help us feel a lot more confident too in what we're doing. I mean, you're not starting every day feeling like trash and then negotiating with ourselves throughout the day if I'm going to drink tonight or I'm not going to drink tonight, or I'm going to have 4 or I'm going to have 7, or I'm going to go to Joe's place or go to Sally's place, or how am I going to keep this hidden from everybody? And like when you take all of that stuff away that it requires to keep this kind of going alive and us to like stay in the dark with it all, like you open up a lot of space in life to really discover who we are as people.
Yeah. There's another saying that I love is it's, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And, and that's been great for me. Like I said, I'm at a point now where, I'm not afraid to ask. I'm not afraid to speak up. I'm not afraid to do things, because what's the worst that can happen, right? Someone says no, or someone says they don't like what I share. Oh, well, like I've experienced enough now in life where that doesn't faze me anymore. And so I can be comfortable doing that now, and be comfortable in my own skin that I never felt like I could have before.
Yeah. And that's huge progress, especially, dealing with that, kind of picking up on that at such an early age. What are some of the biggest insights you have about yourself throughout this journey of sobriety for you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's been really seeing, how big my ego actually was. Someone had once described, my ego was so big I couldn't fit through the doorway, but my self-confidence was so small it could slide under the door. And that was kind of me, right? From the outside looking in, everything was great, but on the inside, I still felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I, didn't fit in. And I didn't realize how much that drove a lot of my decisions. And so being able to look at things from a different perspective now and seeing, what the emotional side of stuff, how all of that has been brought up has been really, really enlightening.
Yeah, and just working through all of that. We connected too, and now, the big financial background that you have too, and that's your pivot now is helping people on this journey, look at that. And I think that that's so incredible because, I don't know everybody's story, but I know a few people's stories, and I think that, that can be a part that takes a hit with leaning into alcohol.
Yeah. It's if you look at a lot of people's kind of relationships with money and their finances, it's very similar to addiction in a lot of ways, right? There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of guilt, embarrassment, a lot of avoidance, that can go into it. And so, I launched a business now where we're helping people fight through that emotional side of money. Actually got a book coming out next year about that. I'm in the process of writing that now. And so, it's been really cool to be able to help people in a different way.
Yeah, no, for sure. I can definitely envision them here quickly on the fly of how things, can tie together for so many areas of it. And, it's probably one thing, right, to kind of get things in order, but then there's probably also another element of like, how do you stay on track too? But figuring out sort of how are you going to prevent yourself from, getting back in this spot too. So that's great.
Well, and it's progress, not perfection, right? Giving yourself some grace, know that you're going to screw up. Like, some financial advice out there, like it drives me crazy. They tell you don't buy the coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, and now you go spend $3 on a cup of coffee and you feel this tremendous amount of guilt. And now you're like, well, I'm not going to follow my budget for the week because I already bought this $3 cup of coffee. So I might as well just go spend $200 at Target. And it's like, no, wait a second. It's okay if you make one small mistake. Like, you can still get back on track. But it's, having someone to hold yourself accountable to, being honest, right? Having someone to talk to and giving yourself a little bit of grace, right? Just because you spend an extra $3 one day doesn't mean your whole life is out of control either.
Thank you, Greg, so much, man. Great job with everything, and really appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah. And any closing thoughts from you?
I would just say for anybody that, is struggling or think they might be struggling, find someone to talk to. Don't hold it all inside. There's a lot of people out there willing to help, and it all starts with just trying to ask. And so find that someone, and things will get better.
Yeah. Awesome, Greg. Thank you.